Hello. Today, we will continue with the heartbreaking case of the Lianmeng, Jiangsu Province, China. This case has taken the life of a young girl forever, leaving her at the age of 18, the most beautiful age in life. The perpetrator, meanwhile, has lived in the shadow of the past for the remaining 29 years. So, what is the origin and tragedy behind this heartbreaking story? Let's watch the entire video and feel it. Hello, I'm Joe. Welcome to Chinese Crimes, a channel dedicated to real-life cases in China. On May 19, 1988, early in the morning in the city of Lianwan, Jiangsu Province, a young nurse returned home after a night shift at the Takho Medical Center. Her home was a simple old brick house, just a few hundred meters from her workplace. When she opened her room door, her eyes suddenly shifted to the adjacent room, and the scene she witnessed made her unable to sleep anymore. There was a large puddle of blood, still wet, flowing from the gap of the wooden door of the adjacent room. The young girl screamed in horror, her eyes staring at the large puddle of blood in front of her. The scream attracted the attention of those nearby, prompting them to rush to the scene. Terrified by the terrifying sight, someone quickly rode a bicycle to the nearby police station to report the incident. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the scene. There, they discovered a total of 3 large puddles of blood, with bloodstains on the walls and drops of blood on the floor. One puddle near the door was still fresh, measuring about 40 by 35 centimeters. 2 larger puddles were found near the corner of the room and the south wall, along with many footprints. However, no victims were found in the room, and there were no signs of robbery. The initial inference was that the perpetrator may not have targeted robbery, but with 3 large puddles of blood, there must have been an unfortunate event. The victim may have even lost her life. Those living in the dormitory and nearby residents said that this room belonged to a female doctor named Tong. At the scene, there were many puddles of blood scattered everywhere, leading people to believe that Dr. Tong may have been killed. Therefore, her colleagues quickly informed her family. However, another female doctor, a close friend of Dr. Tong, revealed that Dr. Tong had another private house nearby. Therefore, this dormitory room provided by the medical center was currently being used by Dr. Tong for a friend of her daughter to stay in while preparing for the high school graduation exam. Upon receiving the report, Dr. Tong immediately went to the medical station dormitory. The police were informed that a girl named Xiao Fang was staying in this room. Xiao Fang was a diligent and studious girl, currently in a stressful exam preparation period. Her home was so far away and inconvenient to travel. She asked Dr. Tong to help her find a quiet place to study. However, Xiao Fang is currently missing, and the question is, where is she? Whose blood is on the ground and on the wall? The police observed and photographed. Along with footprints and bloodstains, there were faint traces of a bicycle and scattered motorbike tracks. Finally, the police discovered, next to a pile of dry grass to the east of the village, the body of a young girl was found hastily buried. The girl was identified as Xiao Fang, determined to have died in a very gruesome manner, with her hair disheveled, wearing only an upper shirt, and her lower half torn. Her trousers were pulled down to her feet, and her body was covered with dry grass. The police speculated that the murderer may have fled hastily, so there was no time to dispose of and conceal the girl's body. According to the forensic report, before her death, Xiao Fang had been raped, her body covered in bruises, deep wounds, a life-threatening wound on her neck, causing severe bleeding. Additionally, there were many other wounds on her arms and fresh broken nails, indicating that the young girl had put up a strong resistance. While the police were investigating the scene, a female doctor living in the adjacent room reported that the night before she had been awakened by a loud noise while still dreaming. At that time, there were no mobile phones like today to check the time, so she didn't know exactly what time she woke up. The female doctor only determined that it was from about midnight until 1 a.m., when she heard knocking on the door next door and the voice of a man saying, "I love you. I can't live without you." Xiao Feng's response was quite faint, telling him to go back. Assuming it was just a lover's quarrel causing a commotion, the female doctor wasn't too concerned. But after a while, she heard louder knocking on the door and the man's voice demanding Xiao Fang to open the door, but she didn't hear Xiao Fang respond. Then there was a sound of the door being kicked open and loud arguing. But immediately after, the noise ceased, indicating that everything had calmed down, so the female doctor fell back to sleep. A while later, still half asleep, the female doctor vaguely heard the sound of a bicycle. The sound of the bicycle being taken out of the room. The sound of the bike descending the steps. Then the sound of the bicycle getting farther and farther away until it disappeared. Everything was completely quiet. So who was the man who came? The information about an innocent girl being so brutally victimized has outraged those around her. The only witness at the time was the female doctor next door, who only knew that Xiao Fang had recently come here to study. Because she worked all day, she had little contact with Xiao Fang and had never seen the man talking to Xiao Fang. She only heard his voice and assumed they were a couple in love. There were no other witnesses and no detailed information about the appearance or name of the man. Some people believe the perpetrator had a love motive, but others suspect the perpetrator had a twisted personality, often pursuing female medical students alone and seizing the opportunity to attack. Some rumors spread quickly, causing even the locals to be afraid to go out at night. At this point, the police began investigating to gather information about the man who had appeared. This was based on Xiao Fang's relationships and her friends. Those who studied with her shared that Xiao Fang lived quite privately and only had friendships with classmates at school and a few doctors and nurses in the dormitory. She never had a boyfriend. Xiao Fang was a cheerful, gentle, and studious girl. However, when asked if she had been harassed or pursued by any man, her friends replied that they did not know. Xiao Fang hardly ever shared about her romantic life. Her friendships were healthy, without any enmity. Investigators faced difficulties in finding a direction. At this point, Xiao Fang's father suddenly brought an important clue to the police. He found in his daughter's drawer love letters filled with sweet romantic words, but with negative and hateful words. All were signed by Liu Xiang. Xiao Fang's father also mentioned having met him and had driven him out of the house when he followed his daughter, and Xiao Fang felt very uncomfortable with his excessive attention. At that time, when communication was mainly through letters, it was not unusual for a young, beautiful girl to receive many love letters. However, the content of these letters was terrifying, such as, "Without you, I can't live. If I can't have you, I'll die with you. But if I can't have you, I'll be a prisoner, a demon in hell." This content was not like a typical love letter, but more like a threatening letter to force the recipient to accept the confession. It's possible that the sender of these letters is the perpetrator of the case, and this could be a case of rape and murder because of love. Based on this investigation direction, the police quickly investigated and went to Liu Shang's house. At that time, Liu Shang was an 18-year-old high school student and had been Xiao Fang's junior high school classmate. However, when they arrived at Liu Shang's house, only his mother was crying and handed the police a letter from Liu Shang to the family. In the letter, Liu Shang wrote about himself as disobedient and apologized to his parents for having to leave like this, bidding farewell to his parents and siblings in the family. Additionally, the police also found a knife and Liu Shang's blood-stained clothes thrown in a corner of his room, indicating that after writing a few words to his parents, he quickly fled. Although Liu Shang was identified as the perpetrator, he had disappeared, as at the time the control of transportation and residence was not strict. Many places did not rigorously register residence information, creating loopholes for murderers like Liu Shang to evade capture for a long time. In the 1980s and 1990s, when the perpetrator fled, the police could only start investigating from the connection between the suspect and his family. There was no DNA, no information database, and no internet. If the offender decided not to contact his relatives, there was almost no clue to trace, as if they had completely disappeared. Many years passed, and the family members of the victim Xiao Fang never gave up hunting down the murderer. After their daughter's death, Xiao Fang's parents became old and their hair turned white after many sleepless nights. Xiao Fang's younger brother, who was in elementary school at the time, had to witness the death of his beloved sister, casting a shadow over his childhood. Over 20 years later, as the parents grew old and weak, Xiao Fang's younger brother still regularly called and brought the elderly parents to the police station to inquire about the process of the investigation. The investigators in charge of Liu Shang's murder case, although many had retired or been transferred, meticulously handed over and kept detailed records for decades to avoid interrupting leads and losing evidence. Since 2000, with the significant development of crime investigation techniques, the population database had been greatly improved. The DNA of convicted persons is stored in the National DNA Database, making it feasible to track down fugitives in criminal cases. In 2017, the investigators responsible for pursuing Liu Shang gathered and organized a task force to explore Liu Shang's escape routes over the past 29 years. At the same time, they began searching for information in the database about people with similar characteristics to Liu Shang. By careful comparison, on a night in 2017, Hua Wenfeng, the most skilled member of the criminal police team in searching for identification characteristics of Liu Shang in the system and searching for data, was working overtime to check the data. Suddenly, he felt familiar when looking through a series of images in the files of the individuals in front of him. Hua Wenfeng quickly put down his coffee cup and stared intently at the image in front of him, looking at a man with a long, thin face whose hairstyle was still the same as before. Hua Wenfeng exclaimed excitedly, and this investigator quickly opened the folder about Liu Shang on the computer to review the detailed information about this murder case. After many years, despite the change of identity and a use of aliases, it seems they have finally found a crucial lead. However, impersonating information and identifying characteristics on a person's body is very difficult. such as when the police discovered that people with different names had surprisingly similar physical characteristics, from height, weight, blood type, and even fingerprints. Ultimately, after careful comparison, investigators found that the man resembling Liu Shang was 80% similar in age and appearance to Liu Tian. When checking the information of the man in the photo, it was found that his name was Liu Tian, with a different origin from Liu Shang. According to the records, he was from Catlam Province, an orphan with no information about his parents. Currently, he lives with his wife, Sun Dong. Comparing the two photos of Liu Shang before he fled with Liu Tian's photos, if ignoring the signs of age, the faces and hairstyles of these two men are very similar. To avoid tipping off the suspect, the police carefully sent some investigators to Shandong to assess the situation first. Upon arriving in Shandong, the investigators found Liu Shang, who had changed his name to Liu Tian, working at a remote construction site. The investigators observed carefully and confirmed that the man named Liu Tian was indeed Liu Shang, who had been on the run for nearly 30 years. The next step was to deploy containment and apprehension tactics, because they knew that the reason Liu Shang could evade capture for nearly 20 years was due to his ability to evade. After mobilizing all the investigators and blocking the exits around the construction site where Liu Shang worked, a team of plainclothes police approached Liu Shang and slowly advanced towards him. At that moment, Liu Shang was resting at the construction site with his colleagues. When he saw some strangers approaching, Liu Shang stood up, pretending to light a cigarette and withdraw towards the gate. A detective called out to Liu Shang, and he immediately realized that his identity had been discovered. He quickly tried to flee. However, with many investigators monitoring around the construction site, Liu Shang was arrested shortly thereafter. Later, around 6 p.m. on October 30th, 2017, Liu Tian was brought back to the police station in Donghai, Lianwan City, Jiangsu Province. Initially, Liu Tian refused to admit that he was Liu Shang, and the police knew that this suspect had been on the run for nearly 30 years and might have researched some counter-investigation methods when committing crimes. However, his defensive psychology collapsed when a detective said that Liu Shang's parents still lived in the area. Now, we will conduct a DNA test between him and them. If the results show a blood relationship, then he cannot deny his identity. When the photo of the victim was placed on the table, Liu Tian slowly bowed his head to admit the truth that he was Liu Shang. At the same time, he also confessed to the crimes he had committed over the past 29 years. And finally, the murderer had been caught, and all the secrets hidden for nearly half a lifetime could no longer be buried. Liu Shang expressed regret, saying he couldn't forget her. He didn't want to harm her, but back then he couldn't control himself. Liu Shang admitted that he committed the murder out of frustration. He was attracted to Xiao Fang and constantly confessed his feelings. However, the young girl repeatedly told Liu Shang that her main goal was to study and she didn't want a romantic relationship at this age. Liu Shang once thought that by patiently pursuing, Xiao Fang would be moved. But many times when Xiao Fang saw Liu Xiang's figure on the way to school, she always avoided or took a different route. Another time, Liu Xiang saw Xiao Fang happily chatting with a male friend, while she continuously avoided him. In the passionate youth, he decided he would live or die with this love. If Xiao Fang continued to reject his feelings, he would die with her. And that night, he went to the dormitory room at Tak Ho Medical Hospital, where Xiaofang was staying, and everything happened as the female doctor in the neighboring room testified to the police. Liu Xiang confessed that initially he wanted to kill Xiaofang and then commit suicide, but lack of courage prevented him from carrying out that intention. Instead, he decided to abandon the idea of suicide and carried Xiaofang's body on his back, walking to a dry field. Along the way, after committing the murder and carrying the corpse for a long distance, Liu Xiang became exhausted and only had enough strength to cover Xiaofang with some grass. He then returned to the crime scene, took Xiaofang's bicycle, and fled. He left the area and lived in seclusion in the northeast region. He learned to speak the local dialect and continued to Baksan City in Katlam province. During this time, he changed his name, surname, and did odd jobs. Sometimes he engaged in illegal activities and always moved to avoid being caught by the police. After a long time of wandering, Liu Xiang felt tired, and through the introduction of a friend, he met his current wife, who had a family in Shandong. He looked for a normal and peaceful life. Liu Xiang completely disappeared after that heinous crime, ultimately deciding to stay in Shandong, get married, and have children. Many years had passed since then, and Liu Xiang thought he would not be pursued by the law after never contacting his family again. But unexpectedly, after 29 years, even after changing names and dialects, he was still hunted down by the police. Sitting in the prison cell, Liu Xiang recalled everything that had happened and felt immense regret. Now, he is also the father of a daughter, and he can understand the pain that Xiaofang's parents went through when they lost their child. There was a coincidence that when Liu Xiang was arrested, his daughter had just turned 18, exactly the age at which Liu Xiang robbed another young girl of her life in the past. Behind the iron door of Liu Xiang's cell, there was only one piece of advice for his daughter. Study hard and don't fall in love with anyone at this age. That wasn't the message Xiaofang had repeatedly told Liu Xiang, but he stubbornly failed to understand. As he said those words to his children, the image of Xiaofang appeared in Liu Xiang's memory again. Finally, Liu Xiang was sentenced to death and had to pay the price for his heinous actions. On that day, Xiaofang's younger brother knelt down to express gratitude to the police. He cried like a child and said, "Thank you all. The murderer finally paid the price, and my sister Xiaofang can finally rest in peace." It's truly sad for Xiaofang, a kind girl with a bright future, to encounter such a madman like Liu Xiang, which halted her promising future at the age of just 18. Regarding this incident in 2017, when the culprit was arrested and tried, many people on Chinese social media criticized the female doctor in the neighboring room with Xiaofang. They believed that the female doctor was too indifferent and cold-hearted when she knew that the dark side, Xiaofang was alone in the room with a crazy young man who broke in. However, there were also those who defended her, arguing that if she had intervened, he could have posed a danger to her, so her behavior could be understood. And this is today's case. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share? Leave a comment below. Chinese Crimes will continue to analyze real cases in China in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support us. And for now, goodbye and see you soon.